IRC into Relay Chat versus Slack. Open versus closed. Simple versus complex. Last week, it was announced that Mozilla are moving towards something more accessible, and we're going to be evaluating products, not protocols. It just seemed to be a manifesto for choosing Slack. There's a accompanying discussion. Like, one of their reasons, I believe, after chatting on IRC, was that the Mozilla IRC network was getting attacked by spam bots. And I think that's just a problem of any successful open product, right? It's going to be attacked by idiots. And I can understand that running their own Mozilla network was a bit of a burden. So hence, just switch to Freenode. They don't mention that option, bizarrely. I think they mentioned something to do with, moderation and things like that. But, the top comment here was saying that, on the Go Slack workspace, they have thousands of registered users, and it's very difficult to moderate. Yeah, and I must concede, I'm using Slack for work, for this and that. I'm having to use the Slack client. It's the only seemingly same way I can move between different Slack communities. But it's just a terrible experience. And of course, Slack is taking 4 gigabytes of RAM on this dedicated, if not more, on this client. It's just absolutely crazy. And another interesting thing was just the chat that people just find it too hard to get into IRC. Hi, so I'm just going to demonstrate what IRC is in very basic terms. Hopefully you know what a TCP connection is, and well, let's set up a TCP connection that listens for TCP connections. So that one here is listening, and this one is connecting to it. So now we have an established connection between the server and the client, and you can imagine that you could have many clients attached to the server. And if I'm at the server and I send you a message saying hello, you will get it. And if you send me a message, hiya, I'll get the message. So at a fundamental level, IRC is extremely simple. However, it's probably worth noting that between the two, a TCP socket connection is maintained. It's not like HTTP at all, really. IRC has a protocol of its own. It's called IRC instead of HTTPS, and it is well documented and defined on IETF. So if you're on a desert island, if you didn't have a connection to the rest of the world, you could easily implement an IRC client from first principles. If you wanted to implement something like Slack on first principles, well, you just don't have a chance. It's not that hard. Okay, you need to really ideally have a shell where on a machine, on a terminal connected to the IRC server all the time. But it's not that hard, but it seems to just be too hard for some people. It just goes on to this whole accessibility thing. It's like, if something's too hard to somebody, do you have to go to the lowest common denominator, which often means using something, proprietary and crap just to get them able to communicate? It's like people don't want to use email anymore. People want to use I only communicate with Facebook Messenger. Do you understand what you're losing? Your freedoms, your ability to come up with your own implementation if you wanted to. You're losing out on simplicity. Just come back from lunch, and I think this boils down to 2 issues. Kids nowadays not learning email and IRC, and I can see the attraction to all these ephemeral platforms like Snapchat and Instagram stories and what have you. You probably like the pictures, find it easier to connect to people. Essentially, computing, just the stuff that we have is actually just built on these very simple standards, and it's really better if you use those in order to do some work. then all these sort of proprietary platforms that will, let's be honest, they probably won't exist in a few years' time. Secondly, the decision makers who decide to use another platform other than IRC, or they choose the decision makers who choose Slack or Discourse or something like that. Like, again, you well, first off, if you're an open source product or company, you're a bit of an idiot to choose a proprietary solution, in my opinion. But secondly, I can understand the attraction because your users want to use these platforms. But I think you need to have the leadership. The decision makers need to have the leadership to say, no, we need to keep this in an open format, like an email message, like IRC, so that we can be accountable and have the vision, a long-term vision of the future, and choose your technology accordingly. I mean, this is so hard. I mean, let's say GitHub, for example. GitHub is a fantastic platform, great issue tracker. If you don't use these tools, you're probably like robbing your company of not just talent, but also just productivity. And I can understand why people would make that decision, but at the same time, you must acknowledge that has a cost, and you need to make provisions to fall back on something else. I really admire the Suckless software group for just hosting everything themselves simply. It's not hard to host a Git repo. It's not. They've made conscious decisions to have issue tracking over email. This is why things like Suckless will be around in 10, 20 years' time. And anyone who's using Slack and all the rest of it will be in a spot of bother. Thanks for watching. Please like the video. Please comment below. I mean, this is a difficult issue, isn't it? But I think we've got to get our heads around it. Thank you. Bye-bye now.